What's up, everybody? Welcome to Conversations with me, your host, Jason Glaze. We have an amazing conversation for you today. Robby Angle is here, and we talk about so many things in this conversation. We talk about concept of God, concept of self. We talk about needs, love, church, growth, groups. I mean, we cover so many topics. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I know you will too. Thanks for being here. Robby Angle.
What's up, man?
How are you?
I'm doing really well.
Back in town.
Back in town. It's been a busy month, but
Yes,
I'm
it
here.
has.
And I'm excited about this podcast, Jason Glaze.
Are you?
Oh, yeah.
Nice. Yeah. It's been crazy trying to get you on. And your office is really next door.
Yeah, we're neighbors.
We're neighbors.
That's why I moved here.
Yeah.
Moved the offices from Phoenix to Dawsonville so I could be next to you.
I love that. I love that. All right. So for people that don't know you, just give us the short vitals. Who's Robby Angle?
I am the husband to Emily Angle. We've been married 19 years, and some of you know Emily. She's an impressive human being,
Yes,
and so
she is.
I'm half the man I am. No, I would be half the man without her. We've got 8 kids,
Yes, you do.
all 13 to 5, 6 boys, 2 girls, 5 adopted, 3 bios. So our dance parties are better than yours, officially. I've been following Jesus since a young age, and I have been all over on this adventure of trusting Jesus, and this current chapter has me leading a 30-year-old nonprofit called Trueface. I survived founder transition about 5 years ago.
Well done.
Thank you. And so, we're settled in post-founder transition, and we're settled in, and I could not be more thankful for the opportunity to just help Christians get unstuck, and create tools to help that.
So Trueface is one of those ministries where everybody's heard of it, but I get asked, what do they do?
Yep.
Right? What do they do? I'm like, it's a good question. I now know what you do.
Yeah.
But just for the people watching this or listening, it's like, what is Trueface? Give them the skinny on that.
A lot of us get stuck in our relationships with God and others. We hit that point where we go, is this really all there is to it? And so we serve people in that spot to help them experience deeper relationships with God and others. And we do that by developing grace-based relational discipleship tools. So we get stuck. So we build grace-based relational discipleship tools to help us get unstuck, to experience the peace and the freedom of what Jesus made possible, of this original good news of grace. And really all that our prayers are, we want to catalyze a movement of grace where we help equip tens of thousands of high trust communities, resulting in thousands of stories of transformation. And so we're more discipleship than evangelism. We build a bunch of tools.
Yeah. One thing that's really fascinating about us literally being next door to each other is if you look at, let's say Trueface has a philosophy, and then you look at New Name Ministries philosophy. We are we come from the same roots.
Yep.
We come from the same roots. The exchange life movement that started in the 70s with Solomon out in Colorado, then really took off around here. That was my original training. I did an internship at Grace Ministries International where I learned some life-changing truths.
Yeah.
And like if you listen to me talk about what I think is important in ministry and counseling, and you listen to you talk about what's important for creating content and to help groups and individuals grow, we're going to have so much of the same language.
Oh, yeah.
Because we come from the same roots.
Yep.
And now we're right next door. That can't be an accident.
It's pretty awesome. Dawsonville's getting on the map with
Dawsonville's
what God's doing in the kingdom.
Dawsonville's on the map.
Dawsonville. So really those roots are, rooted in a right perspective of God and a right perspective of ourselves. It's a theology of grace, how we think about God through a lens of grace, and how we think about ourselves through a lens of grace, which is how much is hinged on identity, which is what is New Name's fastball. Yeah. That's your superpower, helping people understand how their view of themselves changes everything about how they see God, see themselves, interact with others. And, God is, he's designed us. We're made to be relational, but experiencing relationships that lead to growth are hard to come by. That's why we are trying to build tools to help churches, individuals, organizations experience the type of community that God has designed them for. And identity is a pretty key part of that.
Man, churches need that help right now.
Oh, yeah.
They need that help right now. So, like, I know you have a podcast.
Yeah.
By the way, go check out Trueface on all platforms, YouTube. I guess you're on Spotify, Apple, all that good stuff. Yeah, go check them out. You start your podcast by basically, you've got the same missional type introduction.
Yeah.
And one thing you always say is, what if God is not who you think he is, and neither are you, right? We have a statement here that's not technically part of our mission statement, but it's one of those statements that drive us. We assist people in the healing and growing of their concept of God and their concept of themselves in order to have a deeper relationship with God and others.
Yeah.
Right?
That's
Same
it.
thing. Same thing. So you and I both have really bought into this idea, that concept of God, how we see his character and how we see ourselves, my opinion, the most important part of our psyche.
Right. That's right.
You agree?
Oh, yeah.
Let me start with this question. And I did not prep you with any questions, but I seriously doubt I'm going to throw you one that's going to stump you. In today's culture, let's just take North Georgia or wherever you've traveled. What do you think the most common misconception of God's character is that people are struggling with right now?
I think the most common misconception of God's character is that he's disappointed with them, that he's distant, that they need to do something to get in better graces with him, which is rooted in the right view of God and right view of self. And so that question, what if God isn't who you think he is, and neither are you? The adage, what is it? We project the face of our dad onto God, or, whatever those are. We all have ways we think of God, from wounds, like family of origin stuff, early childhood, theological kind of things that we latch onto, and also through the lens of our shame. And so I the most common is that when we see God, we see a face that is not pleased with us. And so I think that's not the right view.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can unpack this a little bit, because what if God isn't who you think is, and neither you, and your statement that y'all use a new name, I will walk us through the difference there, because and before this, we all have to ask ourselves, what's the point of life? Like, why do we exist? Like, let's start real big. Let's go back high level. And can I just riff for a little bit?
Go.
All right. So let's go back real high level. We gotta, all of us as human beings want to make our life count. We want to find happiness, peace, joy, this like deeper longings of our heart, of love, of purpose. Why do I matter? Well, in answering the big questions like what makes my life count, why am I alive, what's the purpose, you've got to ask, okay, if I'm created, then do I believe in a creator? Because that creator dictates the purpose of the created. And so anyone with a belief that there is a higher power, especially Judeo-Christian perspectives, believe that we have a good and loving God. So you got to ask who created us and who they are. Good and loving is the biblical foundation of who God is, a good and loving Father. So then why did he design us? He designed us for relationships of love. That is the point. And the longings of our heart attest to that. We all go, the longings, the deepest longings of my heart speak to a relationship of love, of being seen, soothed, safe, secure, of being known, of being connected. That's the source of contentment and joy. And so we have a good and loving God who designed us for relationships of love. Now, what happened? I mean, this is Adam and Eve walking with God,
Right.
designed to experience relationships of love, because as a loving God who's relational in nature, he made us in his image as relational to experience love with God who is love, and love is transferred relationally and experientially. So what happened is we turned from love. We sinned, right? Sin's such like a weird connotation based on our upbringing, but just I think of sin as like turning from love or anything that breaks relationships. That's what happened. I can sin against you, it breaks our relationship, and I turn away from what's loving into something else. And so that's what we did with God. That's what Adam did with God. That's okay. But what that did is it broke relationship. And so we are now in a new, so how would you describe how we are in relation to the God who created us of love? Who we are now is like broken, separated, sinner. Like not in like you're a sinner, but just like, no, you're a sinner. And that dictates that you have a broken, turned away from relationship with the God who created you for relationships. So what do Christians do with that? I'll tell you what I've done with that. I sin less, I do better, I work harder, I know more to make right what I broke. So 10-year-old Robby, high drive, high achiever, firstborn son, God's the only thing that matters. I'm a sinner. God, forgive me for my sins. And then I go to church and I go, what do I do? And they go, okay, start reading your Bible, learn more about the truth, because you got to replace lies with truth. So learn more. And, stop sinning, give more, do better, love the poor, stop beating up your brother, stop looking at porn, whatever it is, like stop sinning, do better to make right what I broke, right?
And to tell somebody like you that,
oh yeah,
we're just
here we go.
Yeah, here we go.
Here we go. I was a missionary in northern Pakistan, Al-Qaeda territory by 25 because I'm such a high drive, high achiever. So it's like missionaries in Africa or like Billy Graham or like the one like really going after like this Christian thing. So I'm like, that's lightweight. I'm going to Pakistan, So, I mean, but that equation for spiritual growth, which is getting to the how I live to find what I'm looking for, looks like this. It looks like knowledge plus behavior equals growth.
Ooh.
Now, most of our religion, most of us listening to this as Christians are going, yeah, that's what I've been doing as an awesome Christian for so long. The problem is it's just not biblical and it's off. But and why it's so compelling to me, and I keep going there, I wake up there on that lens of like, is because when I am living out of that side, think left side of the equation, that is fear and control. That looks like fear and control.
Absolutely.
Knowledge plus behavior equals growth. So when I'm feeling fear, when I'm feeling behind, when I'm feeling control, not enough, that's indicating it gives me something to do. It gives me something to do to make right what I broke. Now, if that's not the gospel, what is the gospel? Here's the gospel. Jesus is like, Robby, I love you. I know how I made you, and I know you're high drive, high achiever, but stop. I don't need you to do anything. And there's nothing you can do to make right what you broke. That's why Jesus had to come. That's the essence of the gospel of grace. He knew I couldn't do enough, give enough, sin less enough to be okay with him. And therefore, he said, I took care of it all. And I have made right what you broke. And so now there's a new position, a new dynamic of where I stand in relation to who made me, and that is as a saint. Paul addresses the Christians after Jesus rose from the dead like over about 60 times in the New Testament as saints. We're adopted sons. We're new creations. Jesus is teaching the Pharisee, Nicodemus, I think, like you've got to be born again. Okay, how do you do that? He's like, how do you, like it's a new creation with Christ's imparted righteousness into me, the Holy Spirit in me. I'm a saint, not a sinner. And the quote out of The Cure, the key teaching, the key book of Truefaces, do we see ourselves as sinners striving to be saints or as saints who occasionally sin? And this changes everything.
It does.
Because if I see myself as a saint, what that looks like in growth is trusting and receiving equals growth. So the equation for spiritual growth and following Jesus looks like trusting and receiving. He's done it all. He is in me. So my maturing into who I already am looks like trusting and receiving who he is, what he's done, and who he is in me more. And that equals growth. And that feels a lot like peace and freedom, not fear and control.
Yeah.
Which is what Jesus said he came for. Yeah. And so those two lenses, Those are the lens of grace. We either look out of the left lens or the right lens, and that changes everything, because think about how we see God through those lenses. If I see myself as a sinner, I see him as a disappointed dad waiting for me to do more and sin less to be okay with me. Mm-hmm. And when I look at the lens through being a saint, I see a delighted father who loves me and he likes me, and there's nothing more or less I could do to earn any more of his love. Mm-hmm. That is a God I will trust, and therefore receive his love, which is what I'm longing for and what he made me for.
Yeah. God, my mind's going in like 4 different directions right now, and I got to pick one. So basically, a lot of Christians right now are struggling with what the Galatians struggled with, right? So Paul said, y'all, you entered this thing by trust, but yet somehow you think you're going to keep it going by keeping the law and good works.
That's right.
And he was like, he basically called them out on that. But that's what we tend to do. Is we know, right. Well, most people know that salvation comes by trust and trust alone.
Right.
Salvation by grace through faith. But yet now that I am there, wherever there is, now that I'm there, born again, saved, whatever verbiage you want to use, now I keep this thing going by doing good works.
Yep.
Right?
Which makes sense. It's been happening for a couple thousand years. Nothing's changing. Why? Because I wake up I know these truths, and I wake up still. It's just more comfortable and easier for me to try to earn it because it keeps me in control. And so that's just human nature rooted in our pride, because I think of the definition of pride as the chief sin. Underpinning all of that motive is I can. And surely I wake up going, I can. What can I do to, stay in control, deal with this stuff? Humility is I can't. It's the posture of receptivity, of trusting and receiving, which is the beautiful, difficult journey every day of receiving his graces anew and going, man, no, God, I'm going to trust you. And as fear comes up in my life, as I'm worn out from trying to control and earn, I get to be reminded every day, he's like, Robby, stop. I don't need you to do anything for me. I got this. But I just want you to receive how much I love you. And out of that trusting and receiving, I end up sinning less and being triggered less and loving more.
Yeah. So it's so good to hear you say that, because like you need to be reminded of this daily. And so do I. Like, I think for people in ministry, like I've been in this message now since 2001. Yeah. So 23 years I have been like just bathing, basking, and marinating in this message, but I still, can fall prey to the old things of trying to earn or trying to achieve, or see somebody that's like driven like you, positively programmed. It's going to kick you into action. Yeah. People like me that's kind of more shame-based, it'll kick me into what's the point, and give up. Yep. So like we still have to be reminded of this. Like there is no arrival this side.
Well, he loves us too much to let us arrive, because we wouldn't need his grace anew every day. We'd be like, I'm good. I'm living in grace. We missed out. He loves us too much for that time.
Yeah. So I know you are very intentional with words. Yeah. And when you were going through the needs that God meets, or the needs that we have, you used the word I've never heard before. I think you used it. Did you say soothing?
Soothed, yeah.
Can you unpack that?
Yeah, well, let me go to needs in a second of love, because let me tell you how our lens, if we see ourselves as a sinner, we talked about how it views God, but you got to look at how it affects other people, because you mentioned shame in there. Mm-hmm. And if we see ourselves as a saint, this is a lens of identity, how we see ourselves. So check this out. When we see ourselves through the lens of sinner, that leads to shame. Shame says, guilt says you screwed up. Shame says you're a screw up.
You are a screw up.
And you are. You sinned, you broke relationship, you're a screw up. So shame says you're a screw up. And therefore, if Jason or anybody watching this knew me, they would turn this off, because they know how screwed up I am and how messed up I am. So shame leads to hiddenness, just like it did Adam and Eve. And hiddenness leads to being alone and disconnected. And in that alone and disconnected, we are triggered more and we love less. We're more self-protecting, self-promoting, and we miss out on love, which is why we were designed. Now, over here, if I see myself as a saint, that's a identity that leads me to security, which allows me to be vulnerable with you, because I have a secure identity, which isn't at risk of if you judge me or if you see this or know the last 10% of me. And that security leads to authenticity, vulnerability, which allows me to be known and loved, and therefore triggered less and loving more as a result of that. So that changes our horizontal relationships with each other. We have the vertical changed, how we see ourselves, and then how we see each other. And that is where Jesus is like, hey, guys, this is it. Love God, and the other ones like it, love others. We work out this thing together with others, which is why relationships are so critical. Now, if relationships are the foundation catalyst for why we were made, what we're longing for, and how we grow, then you have to ask the question, okay, let's understand and unpack love, which I use the word soon to understand one of the needs.
Yeah.
Love, I like to think of love as the giving and the receiving of needs being met. We all have innate needs, not like give me $20, but like newborn babies and me have needs. And Dan Siegel is a psychiatrist, psychologist, somebody smart, who said there's 4 primary needs. He wasn't a Christian. All humans have: to be seen, to be soothed, to be safe, and to be secure. These are innate needs. We cannot receive those needs unless we trust and receive someone else meeting those needs, either God or someone else. And receiving love is way harder for me than giving love, which is a posture of receptivity and humility, which I wake up. My dad, when I was 18, said, Robby, please read one book. And he gave me the book Humility by Andrew Murray. And I was like, I get it, Dad. I'm an arrogant, whatever. I'm not allowed to cuss on this podcast, I'm assuming. But so like soothed is a safety, and we can only be loved to the degree that we're known, because if you don't know me, you can't meet the needs and soothe and be protector of me and see me for who I really am, and therefore I'm limited in how much I receive love from you. And that's where authentic community is such a key component towards how we grow spiritually and how we work out this love of others in being seen, soothed, safe, and secure, and which is the definition of discipleship. By this, they'll know that you are my disciples, by the way you love one another. John 13:35, maybe? Something around there. But that's how they'll know that you're my disciples, by the way you love one another. That's the evidence of Christ in us, of which is also the grace of God, the Holy Spirit, which is the fruit, isn't even me. Even that I can't produce. And he goes, hey, so spiritual formation is summed up in just abide in me, and the fruit of the Spirit will be love. This is so easy. It's so hard every day, the rest of our lives, to mature into that.
Yeah. All right, speak to this for a second. This is a conversation I have with a lot of clients, okay? So yes, understanding that I have legitimate emotional needs.
Yep.
And I will die without them and kill myself trying to get them. They're not just good things to have. They're not the fringe. I need them. And that around here, we use the word source a lot, that God has to be the source for these emotional needs, right?
Yep.
Now, in making God the source of these emotional needs does not mean that we isolate ourselves from people, because he's made us to be in relationship with both.
That's right.
It's just that people cannot be the source.
That's
okay.
Right.
I am learning more and more that is it almost feels like a tightrope people walk sometimes.
That's well said.
Okay, so I'm not supposed to isolate, but my wife, my husband, my girlfriend, my best friends, they cannot be the source of my emotional needs, but yet I need them. So I need them, but I can't need them, right? And I'm watching people wrestle with this tension. Any thoughts around that idea?
Yeah, I want to hear your thoughts. That's my thought. Because you're right. It's almost like codependency. You want to be differentiated and able to, like, not needing others, but that also means I don't need love and you to meet my needs. And so that's a thin line in health. Yeah. How to walk that. We don't have to worry about codependency with God. Like, there's not too much unhealthy, like, I think it is pretty clear in John 15, is it, of the vine and the branches, like, this is how I've made you. I've reconciled you in relationship with me. I have the Spirit in you now, Robby. Like I am one with you, and abide in me, and the fruit of that Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience. So stay attached, abide. There's, like, he is the source of which we get to work out. And the fruit of that is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, which comes out in relationships with others.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there's differences with you and I. If I'm healthier, I'm less self-protecting, self-promoting. I'm more focused on you. But I'm still letting you love me and meet my needs because I'm bringing my real self to you. And if I don't bring my real emotions to you to let you love me and serve me, I miss out on experiencing love and letting you love me and the things we're all longing for, which is authentic fellowship. But I think that feels like a tension to manage, not a problem to solve. I
agree.
And just make sure that the horse is before the cart in the sourcing of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me the right answer.
No, I think that's perfect. What works for me is the idea of a piece of conduit, right? Like you have been a piece of conduit for me, as a friend. I've had moments with you where God has loved me through Robby, right?
Yeah.
But I can't, if I start, and by the way, the way we know if somebody has went from being a piece of conduit to a source is expectations.
Oh, that's good.
So like once we feel expectations, that's the smoke that leads back to the fire of a wrong thing is the source right now. So if I start having expectations on you to meet my needs, you're not conduit anymore, you're a source. So I have to transition back to God as a source, and now let's see what conduit he's going to use today. Yeah. Is it going to be, does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
So that's the way I like to look at it. I agree with you. It's a tension to be managed.
Yeah.
Like this takes a while to life out, and we're going to screw it up.
Yeah.
Like we're going to make our spouse the source again. We're going to make our job. Because a lot of people watching and listening to this may be like, no, I don't need anybody. Yeah, okay, but there's something you're needing, whether it's your own performance or whatever, especially with men, right? If I got a man who's a client, and we go through all the people in his life, and we're not finding a source that he's looking to that he shouldn't be, it's going to be the job. It's going to be the job, and I think God knew that. That's why he said, hey, I got a job for you, tend this garden.
Yeah.
But then after the fall, he said, I'm going to curse this.
Yeah.
So it can't be your source.
The job is not vulnerable as much. It keeps him in control. It's all the things that, and guys are really good at going, nah, this is enough. Like we can talk about fantasy football and I have friends, I have people, and that's just enough. We box it in right below the threshold of where we could be hurt, which is well below the threshold of what we actually are longing for in relationships of love, where we can meet each other's needs of being seen, saved. No. Let's just have acquaintances. Let's check the box and play it safe. And that is a form of being in control. Back to the lens in fear. Yeah. That's fear and control. Fear of being abandoned, hurt, rejected. We don't put words to this, but the pros don't outweigh the cons.
Yeah.
And in our mind, because we have been hurt before, and therefore the con list feels more visceral than the joy, the freedom, the peace of the pros. And so we draw a line in a circle and go, that's enough. That's good enough. And when you look at control, when you look rooted in our pride of what I can do to find what I'm looking for, which is love, intimacy, we build this thing. If the coin is what I can do, there's two sides of that coin. There's control and there's abdication, passivity. So a lot of us as guys just go, well, I'm just going to lower my expectations. I've been doing the Christian thing for 20 years. I've been a good church guy, giving. I even serve, whatever. And I read about peace and freedom and a relationship with God and like these things I'm longing for of joy. Nope. Hadn't been there, and I've been doing all this stuff, so must be all there is to it on this side of heaven, so I'm just going to ride it out. I'm going to keep this scaffolding of religion in my life to make me feel good about myself and have this way of thinking and living, and I'm going to heaven at least, and so I'll experience the good stuff then. We box in the potential of relationship intimacy with God because it's out of our control. And so we lower our expectations of abdication, passivity of what is possible on this side of heaven. And we do the same with relationships. We minimize expectations of intimacy with our wife and go, let's just ride it out. We're fine. It's good enough. And this God who loves us and has like 280 layers left of or levels up for us to experience what we're longing for is like, oh, trust me, there's so much more I have for you than you can imagine. And my prayer is that for the rest of my life, he keeps bringing me through whatever he needs to bring me through, the painful process of change, which is always difficult, to experience deeper and deeper levels of love, of the longings of my heart, of intimacy, of his love for me, because he says things like, I have a river of life inside of you. Well, I get drips of water at 41, Jason. And I'm like, oh man, I think there's more there. And I didn't even know there was water. I thought I was drinking water, but I realized I was drinking sand in this like understanding of God and all this stuff up until a few years ago. And difficulty, I just hope he keeps peeling, because I don't want to succumb to passivity, resignation, because that says I don't believe there's more and that it's worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. You used the word longing a lot during what you just said. And to me, that's what's important to keep in mind when we talk about expectations. Because it's very easy to say, okay, I'm convinced expectations suck. All right, Jason, you have convinced me that expectations can do nothing but lead to disappointment, anger, and frustration. So I guess I go numb.
Yep.
I guess I go numb.
Yep.
If I'm not going to have
right.
expectations, I guess I go
Just
numb.
lower.
But desires and longing, that's the key component to that. Because we're not to go numb. Those longings and those desires are supposed to, or we're designed to have those.
That's right.
Right. You mentioned about, and I know we talked about guys, but I think women can fall in this too, especially in today's culture of just thinking we're okay.
Oh yeah.
One thing I love seeing, you and I are part of something called Hot Dogs, right? Real quick on what Hot Dogs is. It's a group of multi-generational men who get together, and it's just, we get together in the first hour, we eat hot dogs. In the second hour, we talk about things. And it's not about teaching. It's not about fixing. A lot of time, there's no crosstalk. We just share. And we watch men who probably think they're okay come in for the first time. And all it takes is to get into an environment where everything gets a little still, a little more quiet than their brains are used to, and for somebody to get vulnerable. And they realize, oh, I'm missing something. I'm missing this. Right?
Oh, yeah.
So it's almost like we don't know what we don't know until we see it and taste it and smell it, and then we can't get enough.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
And so for churches to create this is kind of what you're into right now.
Oh, yeah.
Because, churches struggle with how to do community.
Yeah.
They're being called community groups, life groups, small groups, and they come with their pluses and they come with their negatives, and some work and some don't work. We're trying to figure out why. And really, I think you have the answer of developing authentic community through what you do at Trueface. So here's one question I want to ask. Well, anyway, you got anything to say to that before I go to a question?
Yes.
Go.
I mean, if God designed us for relationships of love, do we trust that there's more there? And what you just said was really important, because a lot of people have never experienced the joy, the peace, the freedom of being fully known in community. And therefore, the cons are this big in their head. They're big, and the pros are minimal because they haven't experienced it. And so when you're around people that show the peace and the freedom of being fully known in that vulnerability begetting vulnerability, then it messes with your equation. And you go, maybe there's enough there that's worth it, the cost, the risk of being hurt. And again, if we're living into the security of our identity, that cost goes way down because our shame is triggered less. And therefore the positives go way up in regards to vulnerability and being known and loved. And so you can't talk about one without the other. That's why I'm so glad we started this podcast with the theological foundation. It's like the foundation of a house.
Sure.
The right view of God himself changes everything about our horizontal relationships and our willingness to do that. Now what you're talking about is, okay, you got a firm foundation, most important part. How do you build the house? How do you design it? It's hard to design a house, build a house, small group, life group, cell group. What you're talking about, how do you build relationships of trust of which we grow? Because if God designed us to grow through the context of relationships that lead to growth are hard to come by. Yeah. So what's the art and the science of how we do that, which is such an important question. And we're looking around surveys. We've got an epidemic. We've got a loneliness epidemic. We have a lost art of relational dynamics, which is leading to catastrophic results. And if we're hoping to finish well, if there's a one nugget, I've never met a man, and I've worked with a lot of men and women, and I'm fascinated by case studies of those who finish well, and then I reverse engineer what dynamics led to that. Sure. I've never found one on the course to finish well that's not intentional and consistent with a few other people they're fully known by. Yeah. And so most of us listening to this go, I've got my acquaintance bucket, and it is not enough for what we're designed for and what we need to stay the course and finish well, which is community, which is relationship with all this stuff. And it's hard. And before you go, like I was triggered, you can say, by like, your podcast you did with Casey
Ross,
about like, I love Casey. We work together. Yeah. I love Casey. But your podcast, I think, was terrible. And I don't recommend that anybody go back and listen to it. Don't listen to it because
you called me the next day like hot.
And here's why. It feels like I was listening to guys get into, like, you were talking about real estate investing. This is a metaphor, analogy or whatever. It's like you were talking about real estate investing and single family rentals, cash flowing properties. And it feels like you were like, yeah, we've got a couple rentals. This is terrible. Tenants are a headache. We're losing cash. Let's talk about how real estate, cash flow investing, single families does not work and it's stupid. And so we should stop investing in real estate because we're losing money and this is annoying and difficult. Okay. Or you need to talk about, okay, let's evaluate what knobs to turn, why we think that way. Is it our horizon? Is it our expectations? Is it how much we're spending on renos? Is the tenant, the background screening? There's all kinds of knobs you can adjust before you throw the baby out with the bathwater and go, maybe real estate investing is unbelievable for cash flow. But you just have to change expectations, understand the dynamics that lead to it working versus not working. And that is the difficult work of groups. And so a lot of people in groups are going, churches try the model, the strategy, it doesn't work, it's hard. And we have these expectations of this like beautiful discipleship environment. It's like, nope, not my experience. And this isn't working. So that doesn't work. It's like, no, God has designed us to connect relationally, to grow spiritually. Relationships are how we're designed to grow, not small groups. Small groups are simply a framework of thinking for us to connect relationally to grow spiritually.
Okay, you just said everything me and Casey talked about. Make that statement again, that what relationships is how we grow, not groups.
Yes.
That's the whole point.
No. You left it there. You left it there. That's the whole point.
We actually did.
And I'm going, that's why here's my point to that. That's why it's extra critical. Because we say groups. Okay, just like real estate investing in single family. That's not broken. It's how we're doing it that we need to make better.
Absolutely.
And but the abdication of like, well, that doesn't work, so we need to like talk more. You didn't go to the solution to help people much as I wanted.
You know why? We both admitted we don't know. We both admitted we do not know the solution.
It's hard. It's hard.
But I do think you do.
Yeah, I got some thoughts.
And so here's the thing. Like, I believe that what you're doing at Trueface is very important to the solution of the problem that Casey and I laid out that nobody's talking about.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I agree with you. We basically
That's
laid
fair.
out a problem and we admitted we don't know what to do with this.
Yep.
And the feedback we got was really good because they were like, yes, we agree. So if all we did was teed up for you to come in and fix it, let's go. All right.
Let's go.
All right. So let me ask you this question. We will have a handful of pastors watching this podcast or listening to this podcast who want what you're talking about because Okay, side note before I get into that. Okay, like if you look at the stats right now, the church is supposedly shrinking in numbers. Okay. Yeah. I think you said it a minute ago. The solution is not necessarily, now I do think theology is important. I do.
Yeah.
And I do think that a lot of people are just getting bored because they're so sick of Disneyland at church.
Yeah.
I think that's why some are leaving.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Those people who have the problems with church that they're having would not leave, and they would stick it out if they had authentic relationships.
Yep.
So relationships, authentic relationships, is how we keep the church from shrinking and how we grow it. I completely agree with you.
Yep.
You said earlier you're not very evangelical. You're more discipleship oriented.
Evangelistic. On the, you know, like 0 to 10, 0 is a proclamation of faith. Mother Teresa is like a 9, call it, you know, -1 is an unbeliever.
Yeah.
Like Young Life focuses in that like -2 to +2.
Sure.
Like most churches, they won't admit it. They say they're everything, but they have a niche, of their sweet spot. Trueface's sweet spot is more in like the 3 to 6 range, helping a stuck Christian here go to here, which is that 3, 4, 5 range of like maturing into out of cerebral and into experiential.
Yeah, but I do think you're more evangelical than you know. Here's why. Because I think that's how you grow the church is through authentic relationships.
That's right.
Nobody is responding to the guy on the corner with the track anymore.
That's right.
The stuff on like YouTube and TV right now is just annoying, you know?
And we're talking about the byproduct of relationships is a trusting relationship, which surveys, old studies show the key measure of an evangelistic environment is, do they know a Christian they can trust? And so the byproduct of us like practicing relationships is that the ripple effect of that is very evangelistic. And because we are actually growing and maturing in love and therefore standing out like stars in the sky. And that's attractional to people because it's a person we can trust. And a couple things on there. There's macro and there's micro, and I don't know which one to go down. But here's some macro principles.
Okay.
I don't agree with the church is shrinking. I don't know that. Partly because of a macro, as we move to a post-Christian society, like 20 years ago, I'm making these numbers up, 90% of people would say they're Christians, right? And now 60-some% say they're Christians. So it's like the church is shrinking. I'm like, yo, 90% of our country was not Christians 30 years ago. We would have solved a lot of stuff if we were really like following Jesus.
Sure.
Is probably a lot of surveys would be like, that's more like 10 to 15%, even though the 90% said they're Christians. That's the cultural Christianity that is not a life consumed with pursuing the love of Jesus and following Jesus. And so that 90 is what is decreasing as we go to a post-Christian society. But I think that 10 to 15 hasn't changed and might be growing because it is clarifying like what this way of following Jesus really is, aside from this cultural framework of religion, which you check a box and go, yeah, I agree with that framework of how. That's what's changing, which is not this way of following and trusting Jesus. And so I'm optimistic about that, and I'm a freak optimist, so that is my positive reframe.
Yeah, I know this.
And love is the evidence of all this stuff. Like the brand of Christianity is love, and that's a centered set paradigm, not a bounded set paradigm. A bounded set says you are in or out based on if you prayed the prayer, go to church, read the Bible once a month, whatever, like you're a Christian.
Right.
No. Centered set is Jesus going like, abide in me. Fruit of the Spirit is love. This is it. Love God and love others. That's a centered set around love. Are we moving towards love? Yeah. I think the young people, I think a lot of us are coming alive because it's starting to get clear on what this way of following Jesus actually means. And so, I don't know, this is all a tangent, and I'm not answering your question, but there's some macros here of churches feeling stuck and wanting more that we have to think differently about, even the lens of grace, the theology piece. And then there's all kinds of micros of how we do that to the answers and the thoughts of what that means.
Yeah, I like what you just said. I think the way I look at that is, here's what you're saying. We're probably not shrinking. We're just getting clear.
Yes.
We're getting clear on who is where.
Yep.
Okay. So for so many years, it's like you could live in this mushy middle
Yeah.
of saying that you're a Christian, and you may be, and saying you're a believer, and you may be. But what's going on in your life? Like, are you a follower, right? And so there's a difference between a believer and a follower.
Yeah.
There really is.
Oh, yeah.
So I think what you're saying is that we may not be shrinking. We may just be getting clear on what has always been. Okay.
Back to your question now. That was a tangent. No. I want you to reframe it and push me more. I'll get into. I think you were leading me towards churches feel stuck. And so your thoughts on the answer to groups, so that we don't continue a podcast where we leave that open loop in case. Is that what you're saying?
Okay. So let's just say there's a pastor listening, watching.
Yeah.
There's a ministry team leader listening, watching. They're like, yes, we do not have this component that y'all have been discussing now for the last hour of how long we've been talking. How can they find you? What do they need to do? What are their next steps?
Yeah, we've got Trueface.org. We've got all kinds of tools, small group studies. We have a book for small group leaders to understand how to be more effective, to facilitate an environment that is conducive for growth. We've got discipleship tools to develop the caliber of the leader. We've got one-on-one conversational tools. One of ours that we just came out was a conversational tool around unwanted behaviors. So to serve the church, because in the church, meaning capital C church, because when someone comes to me and says, hey, I'm looking at porn, what do? It's hard. I either become a cop or a coach. I go, hey, I'll check in on you next week. Sin management does not work.
Never.
Or coach, hey, good job. Thanks for telling me, man. What we need is a cardiologist, somebody to ask the questions to unearth the heart issues underlying that. And so we built a tool to help people. Hey, thanks for telling me that. You want to do this tool? It's like 6 conversations we'll have that'll guide us through helping us be cardiologists for each other as we walk along each other's heart issues that underpin unwanted behaviors, because we all have them. But go to trueface.org. You can check out everything there, and most everything's free because we exist to serve the church. Or on Right Now Media, if you've got a Right Now Media subscription, a lot of our stuff is there. But I want to zoom up to the practical of to land on a couple things of if groups are like an early real estate investment and saying single families don't work, right? Here's some thoughts of dialing in that. Okay. One of those on a macro level is the right theory ministry philosophy, which we already talked about. How do you think about change theory of spiritual growth? Is it knowledge plus behavior equals growth, or trusting and receiving? That leads to very different environments that you're going to create in a discipleship environment. So a lot of discipleship environments are like, hey, learn more, read this, go home, and you'll grow. No wonder it doesn't work. And so you're right. But that's a macro component. Another macro component is that we work with churches as consultants, and we help them build a customized approach to their small group strategy. Because what churches do is we read a book, we go to a conference, learn a new strategy, take someone else's plan, bring it to our ecosystem, plan it, and then after a couple of years, it's not growing, and it's and we go, well, see, groups don't work. No. The reason is you've got to own your why. You know your people, your context, your designs around principles of what your hopes for them are in regards to growth. And you can customize your own approach that fits you, that you own. And that is way more productive. And so let me talk about another principle of how you do that. If you're developing a comprehensive approach to discipleship, of which any pastor, any church leader, anybody listening to this, there are a couple key questions that you should be asking. Do we have an intentional plan to disciple the adults of our church? And do we have the quality and the quantity of leaders to make that happen?
And there it is.
Those are the 2 questions.
There it is.
What we do is help you develop a customized, clear, complete approach to adult ministries and develop a pipeline of leaders to make that happen. Pipeline of leaders rooted, thank you, new name, in his or her theology and identity, because that's the core of the health of a leader, which we already talked about changes the interpersonal relationship. So we guide churches through a process of clarifying a customized approach, and there's 4 buckets for any church and when it comes to their adult ministry. It is in this order for a reason. How do you develop leaders? How do you support those leaders? You get 15 small group leaders. How do you support them? Do you take them to coffee? Do you send them a t-shirt? Whatever. The third one is how do you get people from Sunday into community? And the fourth is how do you support your groups? That's the strategy piece. Open, close, men's, women's, Sunday morning, like big teaching, then group at tables, in homes, semester-based, topical, right now media, sermon series. I've seen all those strategies work and not work. And that's what people focus the majority of their time on. But that's fourth for a reason, because it's the minority factor. What they spend the least amount of time in is actually a discipleship culture to develop the quality and quantity of leaders. That is why we start with that, because that's 65% of the equation of whether a group is transformational or not. It's rooted in the health of the leader.
Exactly.
And
that's the problem.
We do not know how to develop in a sequential way, because you can't microwave leader development. It's a process of relational discipleship. And so we built a tool called the Trueface Journey. It's a framework. It's a 9-month framework for an amazing leader to walk with 6 to 8 men, women, or couples through a process of experiencing authentic community, having a model of a great leader, and processing his or her view of God and view of self. At the end of that, you've got the healthiest volunteers, because you did a 9-month discipleship environment around what matters and who they are. And they've experienced the peace and freedom of an authentic community. Those leaders ripple into lead other small groups. That's the majority of the question. And so churches that say small groups don't work, I say, well, how's your leader development pipeline? What's the quality and quantity of your leaders? Like, what are you doing to develop that, if that's the major equation? And then how are you supporting them? Well, we tried a new strategy. That's 10% of the equation, So those are some examples of macro turning the knob to create an intentional plan for discipling the adults of your church and developing leaders to do that. On the micro side, we then take those leaders and go lead. Well, everybody goes, well, I've had a terrible group. Okay, let me ask you a few questions. Did everybody weigh in with their expectations of the goal of the group and what they were looking for ever? Well, no wonder everybody's disappointed and non-committal, because you never even asked them or clarified why we're meeting. And so I'm gauging as a guy, I'm doing 90 minutes every 2 weeks. The opportunity cost of that time without knowing why and what I'm going for. Yep. So even clarifying expectations in the first month or two of the group changes the equation of a group, because people weigh in and they buy in and they verbalize their expectations and also realize, is this the fit for me for what I'm looking for? Another principle is that how are you spending your time together? Like 90 minutes, it doesn't work. Well, tell me how that time is. Well, our leaders just kind of do it. Like they talk. So everybody gets around and talks about SEC football. And then at some point it's like, all right, let's do this. And so then we listen to something, watch something cerebral, and then we talk about what we think about it. And then we go home and expect spiritual growth to happen. Come on, don't blame small groups. Blame the intentionality of the guidance as a leader for how you're processing that time, because it's an art. And so as a counselor, you go, well, counseling's terrible. Well, counseling doesn't work to a counselor. Well, what'd you do? I just went in there and started talking to people. Yeah, there's an art that you spend years and years and years understanding, the same as any relational dynamic that's a catalyst for change and growth. And so what if we spent the same amount of intentionality equipping and thinking through the art and the science of relational dynamics in a group setting for spiritual growth as we did as a professional counselor does about the art of relational dynamics, the power of questions, the posture, the body language, the time, the consistency, the tools for a catalyst of change in the counseling environment? If that professionalism came into the church world, we'd have a lot less problems because we're actually intentional. So here's an example of the micro. We get 90 minutes together, 60 minutes together. That equation I just described about groups, no wonder that doesn't work. But what if you connect in order to learn and then to apply into your life and to grow and to live into those truths? So when you connect, let's call it 30-30-30. You connect relationally. Instead of talking about SEC, what if they brought in a good open-ended question? Like, what's something you're proud of in the last 60 days? And everybody just shares that. A heart open-ended question. What's something you're afraid of? Just talk about fears for 30 minutes. And then you learn something, open scripture, listen to a study, whatever. You incorporate teaching, truth. The point of teaching in the context of a safe environment is to ask the question, and here's a question that you can ask after the teaching to segue into how you grow and how you apply it. The question I love is, what faith step is God inviting me to take? So based on what we just read in Scripture, based on what we just heard, what faith step is God inviting me to take? That shifts the group from head to heart and going, I think he's inviting me like to this, or how can I trust him with this? And then in the fellowship, we then get to follow up with each other and go, how's that going? In a grace-based, loving way, not an accountability way about a sin. And so then you move head knowledge to experience through the application of God. What are you inviting me into? That 30-30-30 is beautiful and amazing. And I just talked about a couple macro knobs and a couple micro knobs that you can change before you throw out groups for anybody listening. Casey Ross, I love you deeply.
All right, let's do this. By the way, I love all that. If I listen to everything you just said, we have to define one thing. Discipleship. Okay, so you use that word frequently in that brilliant the last 10 minutes was brilliant. Yeah. I loved it.
Thank you.
I agree with all that. And I do believe that is what is missing. And it's why people are saying groups are not working.
Yeah.
You just laid out why. Okay. But I think it's important that we make one definition is here. What is discipleship? What's Robby's definition of discipleship?
My definition of discipleship is following Jesus.
Okay.
And what that means is growing in love of God with my heart, mind, soul, and strength. So
following Jesus in love, and following Jesus, loving him, loving others.
Yeah, actually, discipleship is growing in love of God and others. And therefore, disciple making is intentionally and consistently in relationship with somebody else to help them grow in their love of God and others.
Great.
And this is Jesus' definition. Love.
Yeah.
This is it. Love God and love others. So discipleship, if this way of following Jesus, a disciple of, an apprentice of following Jesus looks like growing in that love of God and others. And that's the centered set mentality of I'm moving towards love. I'm known by my movement towards or away from love. And so regardless of where we're standing, we get to move towards love today, which is following Jesus, is as a disciple of Jesus, a follower and apprentice of his way, which is loving God and loving others.
Yeah. Robby, this has been amazing. Hey, so I'm not really focused on getting new people in every time. I just want to have good conversations.
Yeah.
That's all I want to do.
Yeah.
And I'm going to hold you to it. I want you back several times for us to begin to unpack other things, because I think the way that you and I unpack things together are always very beneficial to me. I always walk away with more clarity in areas and then more questions in others. And I just love that. Thank you for being here today.
Jason, you have been an amazing friend to me, and I want to be like you when I grow up. So the more time that I get with you, I'm good with that. So thanks for doing what you're doing, your faithfulness, and in particular, your friendship for me, because this is how we work this thing out of love, of following Jesus, and we practice together. And I've experienced love through the Spirit in you as your source. And so, yeah, anytime, man.
Love you, brother.
Love you.